Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. This video today is going to kind of cover the waterfront of everything we've been seeing here recently with regard to banking issues and so-called mule accounts. I'm going to briefly tap into or touch on tax, a little bit of tax analysis and where I think this is going, due process or lack thereof, and banking in Thailand. For those who are interested in long-form analysis of this stuff and analysis regarding local Thai politics as well as geopolitics and regional politics, immigration, tax, as well as banking and how it all sort of factors into a witch's brew and can contribute to analysis on expat land here in Thailand, it may be worth it to you to email us media@integrity-legal.com. We can get you on the mailing list for our Integrity News service, where I do long form videos on a weekly basis minimum, discussing things that are going on here and the possible ramifications in expat land. To be clear, I've been getting feedback from folks on the paid news service. It really is long form, and it's me just sort of, in a sense, I'd hate to call it stream of consciousness. That's not quite right. It's organized, but it's almost lecture format, and I'm just kind of in a monologue kind of setting, going through the things I'm seeing, the news of the day, and how I see it possibly having an impact on expat land. So that's sort of the format. Also, while I'm talking my book, worth pointing out, we'll throw some pictures up as well. Pancake Palace, this is the restaurant my better half and I set up here in downtown Bangkok, and we are, we're open for business if you're interested in breakfast anytime, as well as American diner style food. Links in the description below to our location. We'd be happy to see you there. So now that I'm out of the way of all of that, or I've gotten all that out of the way, I should say, what are we talking about here? Well, I've seen a bunch of analysis, good, bad, everything in between. I've also seen a lot of just nonsense in the mainstream press covering this whole issue of mule accounts. The thing I saw recently, I'm not even going to cite anything. I think I saw it in the Bangkok Post, but off the top of my head, I'm not completely sure, where they said, oh, well, mule accounts can send somebody who's innocent money and then that person's account gets freezed. What is that? I saw that in an article recently. In a sense, I've noticed that there's just been a lot of spin up without a lot of explanation. Again, this whole narrative reminds me a lot of COVID, where it's just a lot of scare, a lot of sizzle and no steak, if you will, especially in terms of due process. How is it incumbent on somebody who received money in their account from some other account that then their account gets to be frozen without really any notification, to the best of my knowledge, without any kind of court order, without any kind of legal process? Just boom, we preemptively are freezing that. And at whose behest? Is some AI algorithm driving this? Is there some human that's saying, oh, this meets the metrics of a problem, we're freezing that account? All of this just stinks of totalitarianism, for lack of a better term. And frankly, it's not, I've done the videos on this, it's not at all conducive to creating a friendly business environment in Thailand. I think it'll have tremendous negative implications for liquidity and velocity of money in this jurisdiction in a business context, and foreign investment. Especially foreign investment in SMEs, and SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, are what drives the economy here. And these people, and the press is talking about this like, oh, it's, if a mule account sends you money, then boom, we're going to freeze that account. But don't worry, we'll work as quickly as we can for innocent account holders. I've seen articles talking about that. Well, if they're innocent, then why are they being deprived the use of their own money, the use of their own funds? And yes, I know the semantic folks will get in the comments and say, well, hey, Ben, it's really not your money in the account. The moment you deposit it, it becomes a credit on hand of the bank. You become the bank's creditor to that amount. Yeah, I get all of that, okay? We also all understand common conceptions about banking and money, okay? When you put a deposit in, that's credited to you. You want access to it. And it's not right, in any way, shape, or form that without due process of law, just because someone that they deem to be a mule account, which again, what's the definition of that? How is somebody deemed to be that? What's the due process behind deeming someone that? You know, but that designated type of account sends you money. You didn't do anything affirmatively, but they say, oh, now your account's frozen. Where's the due process in that? You know, I just don't see it. Meanwhile, you know, to touch on tax, I have to imagine that to some extent, you know, all of this to my mind is being rolled out. It looks to me at the behest of the World Economic Forum, the Organization of So-Called Economic Cooperation and Development, which unfortunately, you know, say what you will about the generals, the uncles so-called in Thai vernacular, during the near decade they were in power over here. We didn't see any of this for nearly 10 years. You know, and as I brought up in prior videos, they didn't go to the World Economic Forum either. They didn't have any interaction with any of that. Then starting in August of 2023, we were barraged with this stuff. Former Prime Minister Sreta Thavisin even went to the World Economic Forum. I did the videos on that at the time. And what have we gotten out of it? Slower banking, almost neo-Soviet digital banking, and now no real due process in banking. And I have to ask, is this all being designed to create some kind of more intrusive totalitarian tax system? They certainly tried to set up one with the so-called digital wallet. You know, they were going to put the country into a tremendous amount of debt to do it, which would have resulted in us all being taxed more to pay it off, even though nobody really voted for that. That said, they wanted to do that, and then they were going to impose the digital tokens that could be tracked and traced. They could designate what you could buy on it. They could designate where you could buy things on it because they would set a perimeter for its usage. You know, and they said they could turn it on and off, and they could set an expiration date on it. You know, again, this is where it's sort of the nexus with tax here and all of this stuff is, are you trying to do that sort of through the side door, the back door, claiming that there's some scourge of mule accounts in much the same way a lot of totalitarian measures were undertaken under the pretext of COVID, by the way, at the behest of a communist who was heading up the World Health Organization at the time, who, by the way, himself never got vaccinated. And there's footage of that, of him talking about that. So again, the point I'm trying to make in this video is all of this is deeply concerning. It notwithstanding the fact, and again, very similar to COVID, they use a lot of verbiage that sounds very formally correct. You know, oh, we're going after mule accounts, and we've created a war room to combat, you know, and make, you know, basically speed up the process of releasing your account. How about you not seize people's accounts to begin with? How about you use due process and only seize accounts if you have some sort of court order or something that's gone through the due process of ascertaining whether or not some criminal activity has actually occurred, rather than just, oh, we designate this a mule account and that account sent money to this account. Even though this person is completely innocent and did nothing, they're only guilty of the crime of someone sending them money, which they can't control to begin with. Again, it sounds a lot like COVID, where it's like the onus is on you that the disease could somehow possibly hit you, and therefore they can take away all your rights. It's nonsense. I talked about that when I did a video on proximate cause and the notion of COVID. And, you know, it's like a tornado going through a barn and then a piece of the barn hitting somebody else's house and them trying to sue the barn owner. Well, the barn owner didn't build the barn, and that resulted in the house being hit by a piece of the barn. It was the tornado that did it. You know, at the end of the day, it's not the person who's in the receiving account that's doing anything wrong. Even if you believe the premise of the mule account is the bad actor, it's that person. So where does anybody get the right to seize this person's account? Just cancel that one transaction and move on. You know, you claim you have all of this ability with all this digital banking now. Where is it? If anything, everything just looks like it's being slowed down and going to an almost primitive state of banking. So again, in summing all of this up, I just don't see where there's due process with regard to all of this intrusive banking. Frankly, not to be redundant, intrusive or banking intrusion might be the right word. On top of that, I'm starting to wonder if this is somehow some way of like bringing in some mechanism to suck money out of people's accounts or seize people's accounts until they pay some amount of money that's later put upon them. As I've discussed in other videos, especially like the LTR visa, which we haven't really seen that fully play out, but in the event that there is a review associated with getting one's next 5 years on an LTR visa, there's effectively an audit looking backward at all of one's banking activity. Presumably, they're going to have the ability to do that. Who's to say they don't use this mechanism? Oh, we'll seize it until you pay us what we think you owe us. Again, they have the legal authority to do that under the tax clearance regime, which I've talked about in prior videos in the past. So the point I'm trying to make is all of this is deeply concerning. I don't see where it's based on any legal framework that's been in any way elucidated to the public, nor have I seen anything pass through Parliament to this effect. That said, I'll keep doing research and I'll keep my finger on the pulse of the issue of banking, tax, at the end of the day, due process, as well as this whole so-called issue of Mule accounts. And I'll certainly be keeping people updated on this channel as the situation evolves.